We are back again with On the Money Line, a podcast by MMAPlay365. I'm your host Newsome, and we're here for UFC 261. We are in Jacksonville, Florida, and we will have fans back in the arena for the first time in what feels like a lifetime. A part of me will miss hearing the hard strikes landing and the corners shouting instructions at their fighters, but there's nothing like a sellout crowd. And with 3 title fights this weekend, you know that we are heading into a huge event. There's so many good fights on the card stylistically, and I'm expecting fireworks. And that's before we get into Shevchenko versus Andrade, Weili Zhang versus Namajunas, and the main event Usman versus Masvidal 2. But just before we get into the breakdowns, as always, there's a few things to mention in regards to MMAPlay365. The last event was a bad night at the office for a start. 3 units on Jeremy Stephens was cancelled just as the event started, so that didn't help our betting strategy for the night. Babinski went into the one place that he should have avoided, and then the judges wrecked the Espino bet as well. In regards to the Espino bet, I've made my thoughts on the night very clear, and that's where I'll leave it. This is the fight game, so we dust off, we go again this weekend. And just very quickly too, just in case you have missed it, at MMAPlay365, we have decided to put a price back on the Dog of the Week product, but with a twist. It's going to be $1.99 per event, which is still cheaper than a coffee and cheaper than its old price. However, the twist is if the underdog loses their fight, you will receive a 100% refund with our money back guarantee. Remember, we have multiple packages on the MMAPlay365 website for all the UFC betting advice that you'll ever need. We also have various subscription lengths and options too. So to see our full service list, please go and visit MMAPlay365.com for more information or to sign up today. And let's break down some fights in the main event. We've got Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal for the UFC Welterweight Championship. Kamaru Usman is currently the minus 420 favourite. The comeback on Masvidal at plus 335 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I think at minus 420 with Kamaru Usman being the favourite, I think that's about right, to be honest. Obviously, the last time that these fought, the lines was much closer. I think Usman was minus 250, minus 225, so this time they've got it right. I think minus 420, I don't think there's a ton of value, but I do think that Usman could be a good parlay piece in that spot. And as for where the betting lines move throughout fight week, I do think the line's going to get wider if I'm being honest. Like I said, I think Usman's going to be in a lot of parlays. I also think the public might even bet him straight at this line as well. Obviously, we've seen this fight happen already. So I do expect the lines to get wider. I think Usman will close closer to minus 500. And as for how this fight plays out, like I said, we've seen it already. I honestly don't think the result, the outcome is going to be much different to what we saw last time. I think definitely Masvidal is going to be better prepared for this fight. He's had a longer camp. It's not short notice. The weight cut will be a little bit easier. But honestly, I'm not convinced that that's going to be enough for Masvidal to come out of this fight with a win to beat Usman. He's going to have to fight a perfect fight, and even a perfect fight might not be enough. I think with Usman, his striking's looking much more improved under Trevor Whitman. We saw that against Gilbert Burns. Sure, there was moments there where Burns cracked him with a hard bomb and it got a little bit sketchy for Usman, but Usman recovered really quickly. He instantly got himself back into that fight and he ended up finishing Burns along the way. So I think the striking of Usman's definitely getting better, and that's crucial for him because Usman does have problems with his knees, long-term problems. This is a known thing at this point. I don't think it's something that's absolutely affecting him right now to the point where he can't wrestle. Later down the line, it probably will be that case. But as we're looking at this fight right now, I think the striking's going to be very close. I think Usman's dangerous on the feet. Like I said, his technique's getting better with his boxing. He's using kicks really well, and he's very aggressive. He has that forward pressure, and if Masvidal does try and be the aggressor in this fight, I think both of these fighters will meet in the middle. They'll throw punches. That's actually Masvidal's best chance of winning this fight. I think Masvidal has got to catch Usman with a big bomb and put him out. Maybe potentially put on a Nate Diaz type of performance where he just accumulates a lot of volume, starts piecing Usman up, gets him cut, gets him working, and just tries to tire him out that way. But Usman's got freakish cardio. I don't see that happening. I also think that if Masvidal does start to piece Usman up, he's just going to close the distance, clinch up with him. He'll score a few takedowns. And to be fair, Masvidal showed that he can get back up to his feet from the takedowns in the last fight. Again, that was short notice, not so much preparation. So I do expect him to be able to stand back up to his feet here. The thing is with Usman, when Masvidal does stand back up, he's going to keep a hold of that body lock. He's going to keep a hold of him, stick to him like glue, and he'll either be able to ride out in the clinch. The foot stomps were a big thing in the last fight as well. The short, sharp shots inside the clinch, the dirty boxing, and then just being able to drag him back down to to the mat if he needs to. I think it's a really difficult fight for Masvidal. I don't see a huge edge in any area for him. I think the striking's going to be even, but the physicality of Usman, the strength, the work inside the clinch and the takedowns, I think this is just going to all add up to being a very good stylistic fight for Usman. And like I said, outside of one big shot from Masvidal that maybe rocks Usman or knocks him out, I just don't see Masvidal winning this fight, and I think that type of outcome for Masvidal is definitely a low percentage outcome. So for those reasons, I'm picking Kamaru Usman to win this fight and still the UFC welterweight champion. And in the next fight for the UFC Women's Strawweight Championship, we've got Zhang Weili versus Rose Namajunas. Weili is currently the -200 favourite. The comeback on Namajunas at +170 as the underdog. As for where the value is on this betting line, I think the value sits with Namajunas as the underdog, if I'm being honest. I think the line should be much, much closer. I do understand why Weili's getting a lot of respect on the betting line, especially in that war against Joanna Jędrzejczyk in her last fight, which was one of the best fights that you'll ever see in mixed martial arts. But I do think the line is too wide and the value sits with the underdog. As for where the line moves throughout fight week, I do think the line gets wider, if I'm being honest. I think Weili is going to have money coming in on her. I think there'll be straight bets on her. I think she'll be in parlays as well. So although I don't think the line is going to get crazy wide, I do expect Weili to enter the cage on Saturday night roughly as a -225 favourite. As for how this fight plays out though, I think stylistically Namajunas matches up really well with Weili here. I think she's got the technical ability to work her. I think her footwork's good, her movement's good. Again, mentioning Trevor Whitman, he's one of the best coaches out there. He's going to have a good game plan here, but the game plan for Namajunas must be to stick on the outside, use a movement, don't engage too much in boxing range, and try and control the aggression coming back in on Weili, because that is what Weili's going to be doing. She's going to be coming into this fight looking to be aggressive, pushing forward, getting into boxing range, landing combinations, landing kicks, and I think Namajunas has got to manage that well to win this fight, and I think it's definitely possible for her to do so. And the thing is with Namajunas, she's got a trump card here, because if Weili does close the distance and does try and get inside that boxing range, it's not going to be too far away for Namajunas to close that distance even further, clinch up with her and try and get her down to the mat. Now, I don't think there's going to be a huge edge on the mat for Namajunas, but she does have good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She does have good back takes as well. So if she can get the back of Weili, or if she can just control Weili on the mat and just be transitioning from position to position, I think that she might be able to have a good level of control over Weili, get that top control time in, and ultimately work her that way. I think this path's to victory for Namajunas. Like I say, her technical striking and Muay Thai is really good. She's going to have a good game plan here. I think she is going to be able to put volume out there against Weili. The one question mark that I do have in this fight for Namajunas is if things do become really aggressive for Weili, if Weili really is putting the pressure on her, it could become a little overwhelming for Namajunas, and it's all about how she deals with that. And in that situation, if that does happen and Namajunas doesn't deal with it correctly, then it could be a case where Weili just absolutely runs through, and I think that's why Weili is a -200 favourite in this spot, because that potential outcome is probable. But I'm going to side with the more technical striker. I'm going to side with the fighter that does have a couple of paths to victory with the technical striking, with potential takedowns and control on top, potential back takes. If she does get the back, then she's got a path to victory with a submission as well. And that fighter is also a +170 underdog. Now, this definitely isn't going to be easy for Namajunas. Weili is an absolute beast in her own right, but with the right game plan, with the right type of fight, I do think Namajunas can get the victory here, and I think she's got the right coach, she's got the right team, and she is going to have a solid game plan here that I'd imagine her to be able to give her best shot to execute it. So like I said, it's not going to be easy, but I am going to be picking Rose Namajunas to win this fight and become the new UFC strawweight champion. And in the next fight for the UFC Women's Flyweight Championship, we've got Valentina Shevchenko versus Jessica Andrade. Shevchenko is currently the -390 favourite. The comeback on Andrade at +320 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I do think the value sits with the underdog in Andrade at +320 now. She's definitely going to be given problems by Shevchenko. She's definitely going to have moments in this fight where she's going to struggle, because Shevchenko is a world-class fighter, but I just don't think the line should be this wide. I think stylistically, Andrade is going to be able to cause Shevchenko problems, and problems that she hasn't dealt with in a very long time. So I think the value at +320 is definitely definitely an Andrade. And as for where this line moves throughout fight week, I do think it gets a little bit wider. I think Shevchenko will probably close at around -400, -410, maybe -420 due to her being in a lot of parlays. I think she will be a parlayed fighter here, but I don't think the line is going to get crazy. And it just goes to show how closer this fight is for Shevchenko, as she's normally a -1,000 favourite, -1,200. So I do think she will close just over -400 coming into the cage on fight night on Saturday night. As for how this fight plays out though, like I said, stylistically I think Andrade is going to be able to cause her problems. Again though, just like I've mentioned in the previous two fights, Andrade is going to have to perform well here. She's going to have to fight a perfect fight, but she can do that. She's got a really unique style in the fact that she's going to be able to cause problems for every fighter that she fights. The only fighter she didn't cause problems with was Zhang Weili in the title fight when Andrade was the champion, but that was just Weili catching her early, getting her rocked and being able to finish the fight. And that could happen here with Shevchenko. Andrade has got to be careful when coming in. She's an aggressive fighter. She will always look to be coming forwards, to use her strength, to use her physicality. She'll mix in hard punches, hard combinations along with wrestling as well. And she's got to use the wrestling in this fight. The problem that I have with Andrade is in some fights, she does fall in love with her striking a little bit too much and she doesn't wrestle as much as she should. I think Andrade is a really good wrestler and she's a really good top player with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. And I don't think she goes to that as much as she should. But if she does go to that here, if she does become relentless with the takedowns and looks to take Shevchenko down, I think she's going to be able to have success with takedowns. We saw in Shevchenko's last fight against Jennifer Maia, sure, Maia only took one round from her, but she showed that she can be taken down and she can be worked on top if there's a good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player on top of her. And I think we get that with Andrade. It's just the game plan. I'm not sure that I 100% trust Andrade to come in with a relentless wrestling heavy game plan. She should, but I just don't know if she's going to. On the feet, striking, I think Shevchenko is absolutely the better striker. It's definitely the biggest gap in skill in the fight. From a technical perspective, it's just not even close. The thing is with Andrade, again, with her coming into range quick and aggressive, she could potentially nullify that technical striking advantage that Shevchenko has. But then again, Shevchenko is a beast with a Muay Thai. She's got good elbows inside the clinch. She's got good knees as well. So I really want to pick Jessica Andrade to win this fight, but I just don't think I can. If I knew that she was going to come in with a wrestling heavy game plan, then I would definitely pick her to win this fight, but I'm not convinced she does, just because in some fights, like I said, she does fall in love with the striking a little bit too much. And if that happens in this fight, I do expect Shevchenko to definitely be able to win 3 rounds. If she comes in, Andrade, and mixes wrestling in here, then I think Andrade could potentially steal 2 or 3 rounds. Like I said, I really want to pick Andrade to win this fight, but I'm just not sure I can. I definitely think it's a close enough fight for the lines to be much shorter than what it is right now. I just think that the striking of Shevchenko is a massive advantage in this fight, and I think she's going to have enough success over the course of 5 rounds to take 3 rounds or more from Andrade. So I am going to be picking Valentina Shevchenko to win this fight and still the UFC flyweight champion. And in the next fight, we've got Chris Weidman versus Uriah Hall. Weidman, the slight -115 favourite, with the comeback on Hall, the slight -105 underdog. As for where the value is on this fight, honestly, the line is nearly a pick'em. I think it's probably going to close as a pick'em as well. So the lines are good enough to play if you've got a good read on either side here. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, I do think there's going to be a little bit of fluctuation on either side, but as I've just mentioned, I think the betting lines will close as a -110 pick'em on either side as they step into the cage on Saturday night. And as for how this fight plays out, honestly, I think there's 2 potential outcomes here. I think Chris Weidman's either going to score takedowns and potentially find a submission along the way, or win a decision via the takedowns. Uriah Hall has been taken down in previous fights, so he is susceptible to be getting taken down. And regardless of what you think of Chris Weidman, his durability, his cardio, the fact that he's been fighting for a long time and he's getting up there in age and he's declining, he's still got his wrestling and he's still got good topside grappling. And for sure, that is a solid path to victory for Chris Weidman here. And against Uriah Hall, who is an explosive, dangerous striker. I don't really see Weidman trying to test his striking in this fight, so I do think Weidman's going to be shooting takedowns and shooting takedowns from early in the fight as well. And as I've just mentioned, from Uriah Hall's side, he's an explosive striker. He's got power, he's dynamic, he'll throw spinning attacks, spinning elbows, spinning kicks to the head. He's got good kickboxing, power in his hands, power in his kicks. So he's going to be very dangerous for Chris Weidman, because as good as Weidman still is with his wrestling and his grappling, he has definitely got issues with durability. He has been knocked out so many times in the UFC now, and if Hall goes into that fight and lands on him clean and hard, then I do expect Weidman to be hurt, and I do expect Uriah Hall to be able to finish the fight from that point. And for me, this is what makes this fight a really difficult fight to side with, because I think that if Weidman goes out there early and starts shooting takedowns and getting Hall down, then he's got every chance of winning this fight, because he has got good Brazilian jiu-jitsu, he's got good submissions. He might be able to get Hall out of there early with a takedown, but if he doesn't get Hall out there and Hall stands back up and Weidman just sticks to him like glue, it's going to prevent the knockout coming from Hall, and it's just going to make Hall keep working. That cardio might get a little bit drained, and the fight could potentially get a little bit easier for Weidman the longer it goes on. But I'm not too convinced that if Hall's standing back up and Weidman's constantly taking him down, that it's not going to tire Weidman out more than it is Hall. I think Weidman may have potential cardio issues, wrestling too heavy, so if he doesn't get Hall out of there early, I actually think it might harm him going forward in the fight. And I think Hall's power can last throughout 3 rounds as well, and that's why I am leaning towards Uriah Hall in this fight, because Hall could knock him out in round 1, he could knock him out in round 3. I just think that Hall's going to have a battle of that wrestling early in this fight before he's allowed to start really opening up with his strikes. But it's just going to take one clean, hard shot from Hall, whether that be a punch, whether that be a kick. And if he starts mixing things up to the body as well and getting the hands to drop of Weidman and leaving the head open, then that's again going to provide a lot of opportunities for Hall to land on the chin of Weidman. And I think he does at some point in this fight. Weidman's definitely live for sure. He could definitely win this fight. He's got solid paths to victory. That is why the betting lines are close. But I just think that Hall is going to be able to land on him at some point in 15 minutes. And I just really don't think that Weidman's durability will be able to cope with a clean, hard shot from Hall. Even if Hall doesn't straight up knock him out with a one bomb, if he rocks him, hurts him, Weidman's going to start panic shooting. He's going to be in a dazed state, and from there, Hall can start the beginning of the end. So, although, like I say, Weidman's got a solid path to victory, Hall is definitely going to be taken down in this fight, in my opinion, because I don't think Weidman is going to want to stand and strike with him. I just don't think Weidman's going to be able to score enough takedowns over the 15 minutes. Therefore, a lot of the fight is going to take place on the feet as well, in my opinion. And because of that, it just gives Hall so many opportunities to find that knockout shot. So I'm picking Uriah Hall to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Anthony Smith versus Jimmy Crute. Jimmy Crute is currently the -190 favourite. The comeback on Smith at +165 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I do think the value sits with Jimmy Crute at -190. Sure, it is close to -200, but I'm really high on Jimmy Crute. I think he's a solid prospect in the division. And as for Anthony Smith, as much as I like the guy as a person, I've met him a couple of times in person, he's a genuinely really nice guy. I do think that his better days are behind him. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, I do actually think there's going to be some fluctuation. I do think that there's going to be money coming in on Crute, but if it gets too far, if it gets to -225, if it gets to -230, I think people will take a dog shot on Anthony Smith. But ultimately, I do think that Crute is going to close at around -200 here. As for how this fight plays out though, it's a really good fight for Jimmy Crute. This is his opportunity to break into the top of the division even further. He's a fighter that's on form, that's looking really good. And although I am really high on Jimmy Crute, I actually don't think this fight is going to be super one-sided. I definitely think Anthony Smith's going to have his moments here. It's just wherever this fight goes, I think that Crute has an edge over Smith. I think in regards to his striking, Crute's a protege of Sam Greco with his kickboxing. So although Anthony Smith is a good striker in his own right, I just think Crute is a little bit quicker on the feet. I think his movement's better. I think he's more powerful at this point. He's definitely more explosive as well. We saw the knockout in his last fight against Bukauskas that was just brutal. And actually talking about Bukauskas, you saw in his last fight against Oleksiejczuk, he took a lot of damage in that fight and Oleksiejczuk couldn't get him out of there, but Crute did. This is a developing Jimmy Crute. So on the feet, I think that Crute's got an edge over Anthony Smith. I think the wrestling's quite close. I wouldn't say either are great wrestlers, but both could take each other down. And if this fight hits hits the mat. Again, although Anthony Smith is a good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player, Jimmy Crute's a black belt under Jean-Jacques Mercado. That's a legit black belt. He's got good sweeps. He's got good reversals off his back, submission attempts as well. And on top, Jimmy Crute is going to be able to establish a good top position. He is going to be able to work on top as well. Now, one thing that I think that's keeping this line from becoming too wide is the Jimmy Crute and Misha Serkinov fight. So we saw in that fight, Crute made a mistake. He almost had Serkinov out of there, but that mistake cost him a win. But you've got to consider Misha Serkinov on top, on the mat. He's a good black belt himself as well, and I think he's a level above where Anthony Smith is at. I just think this is a difficult fight for Smith. Like I say, he's definitely going to be able to land volume in this fight. He's definitely going to have opportunities to try and knock Jimmy Crute out, but ultimately that's where I see Smith's best chance of winning this fight, finding that one shot that knocks Crute out. And these are big guys, it could definitely happen. Smith has proven to have unreal heart, unreal toughness. He's proven to be durable as well. He's also got veteran experience, which is definitely something on his side here. So if this fight does get close, it does get scrappy, and one fighter is just looking to push through with whatever they've got left to try and get the win at the end of the fight, then I do think, again, that's where Smith's going to have advantages using his experience and the fact that he's had so many fights and he's fought pretty much every top level fighter in this division. But I can't look past Jimmy Crute here. Like I said, I think from a technical perspective, a stylistic perspective, he's got an edge in the striking, he's got an edge in the grappling as well, and that should be enough to get him the win throughout the fight, whether it's a finish or whether he has to get himself over the line to a decision and win 2 out of the 3 rounds, which again I think is a possibility. So for those reasons, I'm picking Jimmy Crute to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Randy Brown versus Alex Cowboy Oliveira. Brown is currently the -150 favourite. The comeback on Oliveira at +130 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I think the fight could be relatively close. I think the line, because of that, should be a little bit shorter. So I am going to side with Alex Oliveira being the value side at +130. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, there could be a little bit of fluctuation, but ultimately I do see the lines getting a little bit shorter. I'm not sure it actually hits a pick'em, but I do think that Randy Brown will enter the cage at around -120, with Alex Oliveira being +105, +115. As for how this fight plays out though, stylistically, this is going to be a really good fight in my opinion. I think the length and the technical striking of Randy Brown is going to cause Alex Oliveira problems, but Oliveira is also a decent striker himself. He has that sideways karate stance, he throws a lot of kicks, he comes forward in bursts, throws hard punches to the face of his opponents as he's bursting forwards, and then if the fight gets very close inside boxing range, he'll push that little bit further, he'll clinch up with his opponents and look to try and drag him down to the mat to work his top control. And he's got good grappling. He does make mistakes from time to time on the mat, but overall I do think that Oliveira is a good top side grappler. I do think he could cause problems for most fighters in the division, and I think if he takes Randy Brown down, he'll be able to keep him down, because you look at Randy Brown against Weili Alves. Weili Alves got Brown down 3 times and Brown was just throwing up submissions off his back, and all credit to him, he did catch Weili Alves in a submission and got him out of there. But I just don't think that that's going to work every fight at this level, and I don't think it's going to work against Oliveira. I'd be shocked if Randy Brown submitted Oliveira with an armbar or a triangle off his back, but the fact is, I think Brown will guard play a little bit in this fight, and that is going to be a problem for him if Oliveira's taking him down, because I think Oliveira will escape the submission attempts from Randy Brown, and Randy Brown I think will keep potentially trying to submit him and therefore losing minutes on the clock, Oliveira winning minutes on top and therefore winning rounds. I think if this fight does play out on the feet, if the majority of this fight plays out on the feet, then I'd expect Randy Brown to have a very slight edge. But I just don't think it's going to play out that way. I definitely think we're going to see some wrestling from Oliveira. And if we do see that wrestling, then I think we're going to see some topside grappling, and that's where I think Oliveira is going to win this fight. I think he's going to be able to get Brown down enough and spend enough time on top to either find a submission, find a finish via TKO, ground and pound, or have enough of that top control time to take 2 out of 3 rounds, which I think is a possibility as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Alex Oliveira to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Dwight Grant versus Stefan Sekulic. Grant is currently the -225 favourite. The comeback on Sekulic at +185 as the underdog. As for where the value is on this fight, fight. I do think the line's quite accurate if I'm being honest, but if you are going to push me for a value side, I probably would say the value is slightly on Sekulic at plus 185. As for where the betting lines move throughout fight week, I think the lines are going to shorten up a little bit. I think people will like Sekulic at plus 185. It's not a bad plus money play. So because of that, I do think the lines will shorten a little bit, but I'm not sure how far it goes. I think Grant might step into the cage on Saturday night roughly around a minus 190 favourite, and in that spot, he might be that value side. As for how this fight plays out though, I like Dwight Grant as a fighter, and I actually think that he probably should be unbeaten in the UFC because I think the judges robbed him against Zach Otto. I think he absolutely won that fight. And then against Daniel Rodriguez, I've personally got a real problem with that fight because there were so many moments where the referee could have stopped that fight after Dwight Grant rocked him and knocked him down a few times. And then the moment Rodriguez hurt Grant and dropped him, the referee was all over it, and I believe the fight was stopped early. So Grant could potentially be unbeaten in the UFC. I think he's a good fighter. He's got a good win over Alan Jouban as well. I think that he's the better fighter in this spot in regards to the fact that he's going to be difficult to take down due to his limbs just being really long. He's got really long arms, really long legs. He's got power in his hands as well. So I think that he's going to cause Sekulic a lot of problems on the feet. Sekulic is probably going to have to try and wrestle him to win the fight, but although Grant can be taken down, he's very difficult to take down, and he can get back up to his feet as well. His cardio does look like it checks out. Over 3 rounds, he does slow down naturally, but I think his aggression, his explosive nature, the fact that he can fight backwards as well as coming forwards as well, is something that's definitely going to play into his favour, because there is going to be moments in this fight where Sekulic is the one pushing forwards, but Grant can fight moving backwards, and he holds power moving backwards as well. So although I think that Sekulic could potentially win this fight if he really does get his wrestling game going, but if he does secure takedowns in this fight, and if he does secure top control time, I'm just not sure there's going to be enough takedowns and there's going to be enough top control time for him to win the fight over 3 rounds on the scorecards. And I think it would go to the scorecards in that scenario, because I'm not sure Sekulic will be able to finish Grant on the mat. I think the majority of this fight is played out on the feet though, or at least I think it's going to be won and lost on the feet, and that's where I think Dwight Grant is a really good striker. I think he's going to be able to accumulate volume here, and like I said, he's good moving forwards and backwards, so he's versatile. That'll help him, and I think he's the more likely fighter to find a finish on the feet as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Dwight Grant to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a fun one stylistically. We've got Brendan Allen versus Karl Roberson. Allen is currently the minus 145 favourite. The comeback on Roberson at plus 125 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I do think the line's quite accurate if I'm being honest. If you are pushing me for a value side, I would say because of the stylistic possibilities, which I'll talk about shortly, that the value probably does sit with Brendan Allen. As for where the betting lines move throughout fight week, I think there's going to be fluctuation. I think the current trend at the minute is definitely the money coming in on Allen. I think Allen might hit minus 150, minus 155, but at some point that'll become too wide and the money will start coming back in on Roberson. Ultimately, when these two step into the cage on Saturday night, I think the betting lines aren't going to be too far off from where they're sitting right about now. As for how this fight plays out though, like I said, stylistically it's a really good fight because Roberson is definitely the better striker. He's the cleaner striker, the better kickboxer. He mixes things up really well on the feet, and he's got power in both his hands and his kicks as well. So he's a very dangerous striker, but the problem that Roberson has against a certain type of opponent is the fact that he does struggle to defend takedowns, and if he is taken down, he can struggle to get back up to his feet. He can have a wrestling advantage in certain fights, like when he fought Jack Marshman, he definitely had a wrestling and grappling advantage there, but the problem is in this fight, he does not want anything to do with Brendan Allen's wrestling and grappling here, because Allen is by far the better wrestler and he's the better grappler as well. Now, the one thing that concerns me with Brendan Allen is his last fight against Sean Strickland. He was in a similar situation to this. Strickland had the striking advantage. I don't think Strickland had the weaknesses to the extent of Roberson in regards to the wrestling and grappling, but that was definitely the path to victory for Allen in that fight, and he just didn't go anywhere near it. He allowed himself to get pieced up on the feet. It was obvious that he wasn't getting the better or the upper hand of Strickland in regards to the striking, and he just didn't make adjustments and he didn't do anything about it. Ultimately, he got finished. So that is a concern from me, but in the same respect, that's also the first time I've really seen Allen not really shoot for a takedown and look to get his wrestling and grappling going. Normally in his fights, he's quite relentless in that respect. So I can maybe chalk that off, that fight against Strickland, as sort of a one-off performance where he was off on the night and he didn't look to execute the game plan that would give him the best path to success. Whereas here, I think he's probably going to go back to his wrestling and grappling. If he doesn't, then a part of me won't be surprised because I saw it in the last fight, but I will be surprised the fact that he's done it twice in a row. I don't think that happens. I do think that Allen will close the distance early on in this fight, look to get his wrestling going, look to take Roberson down, and I think he'll either grind Roberson out on the mat or he'll find a finish. And if he does become relentless with the wrestling and the takedowns, then I think he makes this fight look relatively easy. But if he doesn't go relentless with his wrestling and grappling, the fight's going to be much closer, and I think that's why the line isn't minus 200 on Allen. I think if we knew that Allen would go into there definitely looking for wrestling and looking to get his grappling going, then Allen would easily be a minus 200 favourite because the advantages are really great in that area. There is a path to victory for Roberson though. Catch Allen coming in, defend takedowns as best you can and look to try and hurt Allen early in this fight, but ultimately I think Allen will get to him with the takedowns and I think he will look good on the mat as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Brendan Allen to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Tristan Connelly and finally the debut of Pat Sabatini. Pat Sabatini is currently the minus 230 favourite. The comeback on Connelly at plus 190 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I think the betting lines are quite accurate, to be honest. It's where I expected them to be when this fight was announced. If you are going to push me for a value side here, I would say that Sabatini is the better bet at minus 230 than what Connelly is at plus 190. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, for a start, Sabatini opened at plus 105, which I think is absolutely nuts. Sure that there's a lot of limits on those lines and they don't stick around for very long, but the fact it opened there is crazy. All that money's been coming in on Sabatini. I think it's just stopped though at the minute and the money's slowly coming back on Connelly. I think the public might see this line is a little bit too wide right now. I think Sabatini is going to come into the cage roughly around a minus 200 favourite on fight night on Saturday night. As for how this fight plays out though, it's going to be a good, dirty, ugly, grinding fight for the most part, in my opinion. I think that Connelly is an aggressive fighter. He's certainly not concerned about coming forwards. I mean, you look at his fight against Michel Pereira in his UFC debut, a fight where almost nobody gave him any chance of winning and he was aggressive, he kept coming forward, he's durable, he survived and weathered that early storm. So I think that Connelly's going to have no fears in this fight. He's going to come forward, he's going to try and bring the fight to Pat Sabatini. On the feet striking, I think the fight's going to be relatively close, but I do think that Sabatini can work there as well. But I think there's going to be wrestling and grappling in this fight. I think Connelly will shoot for takedowns. I think Sabatini will shoot for takedowns. And ultimately, I think what happens in the wrestling and grappling moments in this fight are going to be the moments that he's won and lost. I think that Sabatini is the better wrestler. I definitely think that he's the better grappler. He's a good black belt. I think if there is any scrambles, then Sabatini could have some success here. Ultimately, I think that Sabatini is going to get the takedowns he needs to win this fight. I think he's going to get the top control time he needs to win this fight. I don't foresee a fight here that doesn't end up on the mat. If this is a 15-minute kickboxing fight, I'd be really surprised. If that's the case though, I certainly wouldn't rule Sabatini out of this fight. I just think the betting lines would absolutely not reflect a 15-minute kickboxing fight. I think the fight would be much closer. But like I say, I think wrestling, grappling and top control are going to play a big part in this fight, and that's where I think that Sabatini's got the advantages, big advantages here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Pat Sabatini to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Batgarel Danaa versus Kevin Natividad. Batgarel is currently the minus 185 favourite. The comeback on Natividad at plus 160 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I know I've said this a lot in this episode of the podcast, but I think that the betting lines are quite accurate here. If you are going to push me for a value side, I would say that Batgarel at minus 185 is the better bet than Natividad at plus 160. As for where the betting lines move throughout fight week, there's been a lot of money coming in on Batgarel over the last 24 hours. He was only minus 150 yesterday, so I do agree with that line movement. But on the flip side to that, I do think there's only so wide this line can get before money naturally comes back in on Natividad, because if Batgarel does get to minus 200, then I do expect a lot of money to be coming back in on Natividad. Ultimately, when both of these fighters step into the cage on Saturday night, I think the betting lines are going to be roughly where they're sitting right about now. As for how this fight plays out though, I think this is going to be a good fight. I think it's going to be won and lost on the feet. However, if there is any wrestling or grappling offensively, I think that's more likely to come from Natividad. Batgarel is definitely more of a seasoned striker, a lot of kickboxing experience, but both fighters are really aggressive. I don't think either fighter is going going to be wanting to fight on the back foot here. But one of the reasons why I like Batgarel as a striker is because he can fight on the back foot. He can fight moving forwards. He can fight moving backwards. He will stand his ground and exchange as well. He's durable. I've seen him hit clean hard quite a few times and it's not really rocked him or wobbled him. So he's got a good chin on him. And you can really see that he is a seasoned striker with his kickboxing, with his Muay Thai, because everything he throws is just thought about. It's clean, it's crisp, it's accurate. He doesn't really waste strikes. He does throw decent volume as well. He doesn't get hit too much. His cardio checks out over 3 rounds. So it's going to be a really good fight, because on the other side, Natividad is a very aggressive fighter. He'll come forward, he'll look to get in boxing range, he'll look to land big shots. He has got knockout power as well. We've seen him knock fighters out cold before. But a couple of the issues that I've got with Natividad, first one, striking defense. When he is brawling, when he is throwing big shots, he does leave himself open to be countered against a good striker, which is what I believe Batgarel is. And he's got quite a wide stance as well, so he's susceptible to be kicked to the calf. However, to counter that, he does counter those calf kicks also. If a fighter starts kicking his calf, he'll fire back. Like I said, it's going to be a really good fight. I think it's going to be quite explosive as well. I definitely think that Natividad, though, will do himself a favour if he looks to start wrestling and grappling. But although that is a minimal path to victory for him, I do think it's going to be difficult for him to take Batgarel down and keep him down at the same time. Batgarel definitely can be taken down, but he's very difficult to take down. He makes his opponents wait for the takedowns, and if you do take him down, he'll be launching elbows at your head from bottom in order to keep himself active before he looks to make his way back up to his feet. And again, he's got a decent get-up game. So I do think it's going to be a difficult fight for Natividad, because I think that the defensive work that Batgarel does in the wrestling and the grappling will nullify the offensive work that Natividad does with the wrestling and grappling. And that's why I think the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet. And I have to side with the fighter that I think is the cleaner, crisper, more seasoned striker, the fighter with the higher volume. Again, that's another thing that I think Natividad really needs to work on, just keeping himself active. He has moments of inactivity. And then going back to Batgarel and his striking, he doesn't get hit too much, and couple that with the volume that he puts out, I have to side with the seasoned striker in the fight that I think is going to be won and lost on the feet. So for those reasons, I'm picking Batgarel Danaa to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Rong versus Rodrigo Vargas. Rong, the debutant, is currently minus 255. The comeback on Vargas at plus 215 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, I do understand why Rong is a minus 255 favourite here. It makes sense, but at the same time, it's also quite wide for a debutant in the UFC too. I just don't think that there's enough value on Rodrigo Vargas as an underdog in this spot, because I think Rong is looking like a very good fighter and he could be a good addition into the UFC roster as well. And as for where the betting lines move throughout fight week, I don't think there's going to be too much movement, because I don't think people are going to be rushing to bet Rong here at minus 255. And on the flip side to that, I'm not sure there's going to be many people wanting to take the plus money on Vargas either. So when they step into the cage on Saturday night, I think the lines are going to be sitting roughly where they're at right about now. And as for how this fight plays out, Rong was definitely an interesting fighter to research and find out about. He made his professional MMA debut 19 days after his 16th birthday. He had 5 fights in his first year as a 16-year-old as well, and he's a 21-year-old fighter with a record of 17-3, which reminds me a lot of where we're sitting with Song Yadong, who is also a very good fighter in the UFC. I think that Rong is a really good striker. He's aggressive, he's got power, he will also hit opportunistic takedowns as well. So he's got a good all-round game, and he's got plenty of experience for a young kid. And with that experience, he'll also be developing from fight to fight as well. So we could see a really much improved fighter than what we've seen in tape, albeit minimal tape. Whereas Rodrigo Vargas is a bit of a meathead. He'll come forward aggressively. Again, he's got a good all-round style of fighting. He'll wing powerful punches, big hooks, looking for that one bomb. He'll also mix in wrestling himself. I don't think he's got the best wrestling or top control though. With the wrestling, I talk more about defensively. I think he can be taken down. We saw that in his fight against Alex De Silva, and I think that Rong here is definitely going to have a striking advantage. I think he's going to be aggressive. I think he's going to be powerful. I think he'll get the respect of Rodrigo Vargas very early on in this fight. But if things aren't going exactly how Rong wants it to go, then I think he can revert into his opportunistic takedowns, the reactive takedowns, as Rodrigo Vargas is coming forwards aggressively, just level changing and using that forward momentum back on Vargas to take him down and get on top. So I think that Rong Zhu's got a couple of paths to victory here. I think he's the younger fighter, the fresher fighter, the hungrier fighter. I think he's got power he'll be able to mix in his wrestling. I do like what I see from Rong Zhu, and I'm not that high on Rodrigo Vargas, at least not just yet anyway. So I'm picking Rong Zhu to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jeff Molina versus Aori Kileng. I really hope I haven't butchered that name. If I have, I do apologise. We've got Jeffrey Molina at -110 and Kileng also at -110 as a pick'em fight. As for where the value is on the betting line, as I've just mentioned, the betting line is a -110 pick'em on either side, so the line is close. If you've got a good read on this fight, then either side is playable as long as you've got that good read. As for where the betting lines move throughout fight week, I think they're going to fluctuate a little bit, but ultimately I think people are just really unsure, especially when you look into this fight. I think there's multiple ways this fight can go. I think there's a bit of lack of tape on Kileng as well. So when these two fighters step into the cage on Saturday night, I do expect the betting lines to be roughly where they're sitting right about now as this -110 pick'em. Now, as for how this fight plays out, like I've just mentioned with Rong Zhu, this is another Chinese fighter in Aori Kileng that just looks to be really well-rounded, aggressive on the feet, power in his hands, opportunistic takedowns, decent grappling. So he's a fighter that is very well-rounded, and I think we're seeing a lot of this with the fighters coming out of China. They're not one-dimensional, they're just really well-rounded mixed martial artists. And like I say, the same goes for Kileng here. He's going to give Jeff Molina problems in this fight. He's going to have his moments, but I also think Jeff Molina is a decent fighter himself as well. He's definitely a fighter, in my opinion, that needs to work on certain areas. So in regards to his defensive wrestling and fighting off his back, his defensive jiu-jitsu, those areas definitely need improving in my opinion, but we haven't seen him taken down and controlled in a couple of fights, so he may be making these developments. He's still a really young fighter himself, so these developments are happening from fight to fight. But Molina comes from a striking background, you know, he's a good striker, he's very good in regards to mixing things up with his kicks and with his hands. He puts combinations together well, he remains active throughout a fight. He's relatively durable as well. We have seen him dropped a couple of times, but he recovers quickly, he gets back up. Obviously that's not a good look on the scorecard, so if Kileng can rock Molina and drop him, then he's going to win rounds that way. So this is ultimately why it's a really close fight, because I think Molina is definitely the fighter that is going to be making those rapid improvements from fight to fight. He's got a good camp behind him as well. But the thing is with Aori Kileng, I just think he's the more polished and well-rounded fighter at this point. I think he's going to be dangerous in regards to power in his hands. Like I said, we've seen Molina dropped before, so that's going to be something that he's going to look to be doing, coming forwards, being aggressive and throwing inside of boxing range. But like I say, he's also got that wrestling and grappling as well. I do think that if he takes Molina down, he will be able to score takedowns and he will be able to get top control time. I don't think it's going to be easier for Kileng. I definitely think that Jeff Molina is very live in this fight. I think the fight is a pick'em for a reason. The only concern I have with Kileng is, like I say, just the lack of tape. I'd have liked to have seen more of him, but he does look like a fighter that is going to be very good wherever this fight goes. And I do see holes in Molina right now as a fighter. I expect him to make developments again coming into this fight, but I'm just not convinced it's going to be enough to really make him shine. I think the fight's going to be close. I'm going to side with the fighter that I believe is more polished and more well-rounded, so I'm picking Aori Kileng to win this fight. And in the final fight of this breakdown, we've got Ariane Carnelossi versus the newcomer Na Liang. Carnelossi is currently the -200 favourite. The comeback on Liang at +170 as the underdog. As for where the value is on the betting line, again we've got another Chinese fighter with a lack of recent tape, but from what I have seen and what I have researched and found out, I do think that Na Liang is the value side at +170. As for where the betting line moves throughout fight week, all the money's been coming in on Carnelossi over the last 24 to 48 hours, and I'm not sure that I totally agree with it, because I don't think Carnelossi is a killer or anything, and like I say, there's been a lack of tape. I'm just surprised there was a lot of action on this fight as a whole, so I think that that's going to slow down a little bit. I do expect some money to come back in on Na Liang, because from the tape that you can see of her, she does look very, very good. So I do expect the lines to close up a little bit. Ultimately, I think Carnelossi is going to go into the cage on Saturday night at around a -185 favourite. As for how this fight plays out though, like I said, there has been a lack of tape on Na Liang, but again, from what I've seen of her, she looks like she's got a good wrestling game. She looks like she's got explosive grappling, good in the scrambles, good at getting in top position, a magnet for that top position, and it looks like she's got good submissions as well. And in regards to her competition and the level of quality of opponents that she's been fighting, she's fought some really good women. She's fought Julia Berezkova, she's fought Lilia Shakirova, Juliana Vazquez. So it's not as if she's been fighting fighters that are just out there to pad a record. Whereas Carnelossi, for example, outside of Angela Hill, she has fought some very sketchy opponents, shall we say, with records that aren't that convincing. And talking about being convincing, I'm not convinced of Carnelossi just yet. That could change if she comes out here and looks great. That will definitely change my opinion of her, but I just don't think she's a world beater fighter. She's an aggressive fighter, a little bit of a meathead. She'll come forwards aggressively, looking to land big combinations, looking to hurt her opponents, cut them up, potentially knock them out. And I'm just not sure that that's going to work against someone like Na Liang. Now, something else I found out about Na Liang is she started in Wushu, which is sort of a striking and wrestling hybrid over in China. She transitioned to wrestling. She wrestled for quite a while before she transitioned to mixed martial arts. She used to train 10 hours a day. She was ranked in the top 15 in the Shanghai Performance Institute ranking system, and that's ranked with males and females as well. So she was top 15 there over the male and female fighters. So she's very highly thought of, and I, again, from the minimal tape that I've seen, like what I see from her. She's going to have a big height advantage, a big reach advantage in this fight, both arms and legs, and actually that might hinder the wrestling a little bit, especially the traditional wrestling takedowns like the double legs and single legs. So she might have to look for body locks and trips and throws here, which could be a possibility, but I do think that she's going to be able to get Carnelossi down. I think that'll be a game plan. I don't think that a game plan will be to trade inside boxing range. I think that would be stupid. I think she'll stick on the outside until Carnelossi becomes too aggressive, which naturally she probably will, and then she'll look to close the distance, clinch up and get her to the mat. I think that, again, from what I've seen minimal tape with Liang, that her grappling's really good, her scrambling's really good, and I think she's got a good path to victory here, and as a plus 170 favourite, I just don't agree that the betting line should be that wide. Like I said, I like what I've seen from the minimal tape I've watched of Na Liang. She comes from a background where a lot of people are high on her and she's highly sought after. I like what I've seen. I think that at plus 170 the betting line's too wide. I think she's got paths to victory. I think she's got physical advantages, so I'm picking Na Liang to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of On the Moneyline. I hope you all enjoyed it, and as always, fight fans, I'd appreciate all the likes to this video and subscriptions to our MMAPlay365 YouTube channel too. Remember, you can get all the betting advice you'll ever need over at MMAPlay365.com. We cater for long-term gamblers that like to build their own bets and strategies, gamblers that just want to follow exactly what I bet on, and we also cater for you fun gamblers that like the long shot fun parlays, or ACCAs, accumulators as we call them in the UK. Even if you only want our best value underdog for the event, which comes with a money back guarantee if it loses, by the way, we have plenty of different packages and subscription options for you guys to choose from, and they're all at very affordable prices too. Just hop on to MMAPlay365.com and see what's best for you. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you at the next event.